Edgar Martinez, a fly ball to deep center field.
When you hit over 350 for a season in the major leagues and nobody knows who you are after you retire, that's a problem.
It will fly away. Edgar Martinez.
Edgar Martinez was a DH, emphasis on the H, a hitting machine who, by dint of geography, never got his just dues. In 18 seasons, all in the Seattle Frontier Outpost, he rapped out more than 2,200 hits, averaged .312, and drove in more than 1,200 runs. When Ken Griffey Jr. was traded before the 2000 season, Martinez more than filled that power vacuum with a league-leading 145 RBI.
He hammers it to deep left field, way back and gone. A grand slam home run for Edgar Martinez.
Edgar Martinez has to be one of the most underrated baseball players in history, one of the most clutch hitters in the game, and defined designated hitter in the American League.
This guy could hit for average. Left-handers, right-handers. He was a doubles machine.
Yanks it to left center field, and Edgar's double has tied the game.
If he played for a team like the Red Sox or the Yankees, he may have gotten a bit more pub, but playing 3,000 miles away from the media center of the country definitely hurt him.
There is something to Seattle being in the wilderness. It's not fair to people in Seattle, great athletes, but they kind of go up there and they disappear from the rest of us. If you were in New York, you'd be a legend.
Juan Marichal was such an artiste on the mound that it was a pleasure to see him warm up. It was a pleasure to sit and watch.
Juan Marichal had a chorus line delivery and a rubber right arm that produced 3,500 innings over 16 seasons. In a 7-year stretch in the 60s, the Dominican Maestro was a 20-game winner 6 times for the Giants. In all, he won 243 games and compiled an ERA of 2.89 during his Hall of Fame career.
So many outings, so many innings, so many wins, so many things. I was like shocked. I'm like, wow. This is unreal, these numbers. Oh my God, he's great.
Marichal was the greatest pitcher I ever faced in my life because he had 5 pitches he could throw for strikes at any given time.
If you were around when he pitched, he wasn't underrated. Now he is because no one remembers who he was, and that's the problem. I'm too old and everybody else is too young.
My son has a poster on his bedroom wall of Juan Marichal at the peak of his high kick windup. And he knows that it's a wonderful baseball poster, but he didn't know it was Marichal until I told him. I bet if it was Koufax, he'd have known.
Lefty Grove was as dominant in 1929 to 31 as Sandy Koufax was from 1962 to 1966. I believe that Lefty Grove was the greatest pitcher of all time.
He led the American League in ERA an unprecedented 9 times, and for the Philadelphia A's won 20 or more 7 straight years. In 1941, after 17 seasons, he retired with 300 wins and, in the lively ball era, an ERA of 3.06.
I never saw the man pitch, but 300 wins. You can make a case he's one of the top 5 pitchers in the history of baseball.
Take a look at how much better he is than the rest of the league and the next best pitcher in any given year, and you just have to marvel.
Could Lefty Grove have struck out the side against the 1996 Yankees? Who knows? Of course, he had a 102-mile-an-hour fastball, so I imagine he'd have done very well against any team.
Jack Morris was one of the biggest big-game pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball, and nobody knows about it.
Jack Morris was a snarling, hyper-competitive pitcher who thrived on center stage. He helped 3 teams win the World Series: the 1984 Tigers, the 1991 Twins, and the 1992 Blue Jays. In 18 big league seasons and nearly 4,000 innings, he won 254 games, compiling an ERA of 3.9. His 10-inning shutout of Atlanta in Game 7 of the 91 World Series sparkles still.
Jack Morris was a really good pitcher who pitched one of the great World Series games of all time. You pitched 10 scoreless innings in Game 7 of a World Series. I'm not sure how much more anyone can ask of you.
Game 7, on the line, 10 innings, gave them nothing. Jack Morris was the ace for 3 different World Series teams.
Jack Morris is underrated. He gets really dissed in the Hall of Fame balloting, when you could definitely make a case he belongs in Cooperstown.
Got him swinging, and he has his no-hitter.
Morris pitched, he used to get guys hooting at him from the other dugout. Why? Because he was competing so hard. He's one of those guys look in the dugout, and I mean, he's out there to beat you.
I think if the one word described him, he was a heck of a competitor. Some guys are magical. Jack Morris was magical.
If I had the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket, you know, the free admission, and I could give that to any baseball player into the Hall of Fame, I would give it to Jim Rice.
And there's a line shot, left field. Looking up, this ball is gone, a home run.
Jim Rice was both fearsome and feared in a 16-year career spent entirely with Boston. In half those seasons, he was an all-star and 3 times led the league in home runs. In 1978, he was the MVP, hitting .315, cracking 46 home runs, and driving in 139. His numbers are on the razor's edge, but he remains standing on the other side of the door into Cooperstown.
Jim Rice hit the most prodigious home runs you ever saw.
Here's a guy that is on the cusp. 298 batting average, not quite 300. 382 home runs, not quite 400.
He was a good athlete, could run. I think one year he hit 16 triples.
Rice is on his way to third, and Strawberry's throw not in time.
Jim Rice was the single most frightening hitter I think I ever saw as a fan.
And look at the Red Sox treat Jimmy Rice at home plate.
Jim Rice, I think, is a very underrated player when you look at him history-wise.
How can you keep this guy out of the Hall of Fame? His numbers are there. You know why? Because a couple of guys got snubbed for an interview back in the day. He was a surly guy at times. He was moody. And those guys keep him out of the Hall of Fame, and it's totally unfair.
If you go by and look at that time compared to the players that are in the Hall of Fame, I should be in the Hall of Fame.
Jim Rice was playing at a time when 38 home runs and 109 RBIs was a huge year. The fact that they aren't anymore should not be held against him. Jim Rice is underappreciated.
Talk about being underrated. Andre Dawson is right there at the top or the bottom of the list.
There's a drive, way back. The Cubs win. The Cubs win. The Cubs win. Andre Dawson.
Andre Dawson amassed almost 2,800 hits and nearly 1,600 RBI and won 8 Gold Gloves. And in 1987 with the Cubs, he became the first player to be voted MVP on a last-place team when he led the National League with 49 homers and 137 RBI. Despite such credentials, Andre isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Going back. Oh, what a catch by Andre Dawson.
You know, one of the biggest mysteries known to mankind is why in the world is Andre Dawson not in the Baseball Hall of Fame? It's just incredible.
There are not a lot of guys that have the statistics that Andre Dawson has. When you're on a short list of guys for major accomplishments and you're not in the Hall of Fame, you're underrated.
Andre, right down the middle, straightaway center.
I think the thing that made him so good was that he knew the strike zone.
To sustain a career, to be able to go out there and perform every day, I never took that for granted.
Here's a guy that won a Most Valuable Player award for a last-place team. This guy was great.
There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
To me, it's amazing that he isn't on the tip of our tongues every time we talk about the greatest player in the history of baseball.
No major leaguer has hit as many home runs as he, 755. No one has driven in as many, 2,297. Hank Aaron made the All-Star team 21 straight times. For all his power, he still hit .305. For 13 consecutive years, he had at least 100 runs batted in. The eternal mystery is how such a titan could be underrated.
Anybody can hit 755 home runs and be underrated. It's Hank Aaron.
I would say he was like the lost sheep of the great ones. He never got that great of attention.
Aaron just came across as a passive, mechanical kind of player. Despite hitting more home runs than anybody in the history of baseball, really never got his due.
I didn't do things with a flair or no stretch of the imagination. I just didn't feel like I needed to run after the ball if it was 20 rows in the stands, you know, and kick it up all that fuss. What you saw me do on Monday is what you probably will come to the ballpark on Tuesday and Wednesday and see me do.
A swing and a drive back into center field. It's a home run. The Braves are the champions of the National League.
I admire Hank Aaron. We know the situation. We can understand what he's gone through. Do we appreciate what he stood for and what he has given us? Oh, yes.
I think Hank Aaron's always going to be underrated to an extent because of the person he passed on the home run list.
Take a look at his other stats, the 3,000 hits, the RBIs. It all goes to the home runs, total bases. He did it all. He was the complete player, and nobody ever gives him credit.
Robinson, the right-hand batter.
Long drive to left field, way back, kiss it goodbye, home run.
Frank Robinson definitely falls into the underrated category.
My goodness, what a blast.
Nobody has been through the mill.
Oh, my goodness.
As long and as well as Frank Robinson has.
Frank Robinson's initials might as well have been MVP. He earned that honor in both leagues, 1961 with the Reds, 1966 with the Orioles, and also in an All-Star game and in a World Series. In 1966, he also won the Triple Crown. 49 homers, 122 RBI, and a .316 average.
Triple Crown winner. Nobody does that these days. That's leading the league in average, home runs, RBIs.
Frank Robinson is the most underrated player in the history of Major League Baseball. The only guy ever to win Most Valuable Player awards in both leagues, played hard. For the longest time, he was fourth on the all-time home run list. Nobody knew it.
I think with today's medium, he'd be a megastar. It would be Jordan-esque if a guy was that good and dominated the sport for as long as he did.
He didn't make that all-century team, which was preposterous. They had Pete Rose on there as an outfielder. Ridiculous situation.
That makes me laugh. When I saw those guys picking out the all-century team, and I didn't see Frank Robinson's name in that thing, and I said, what a joke this is.
I know I'm not real popular maybe out there as some of the other guys are among the fans, and it does bother me. I would have loved to have made the all-century team.
Sullivan's first pitch to Stanton, swung onto the drive back into right field. A long one, the ball game is over.
It just drives me crazy the way Musial has disappeared from baseball's consciousness. It's a crime because Musial was an absolutely great baseball player.
Preacher Rose said the way to deal with Stan Musial was to throw 4 balls, then try to pick him off. Before there was demand, there was Stan the Man, with the peekaboo stance and the magic wand bat. The St. Louis Cardinals icon retired with a .331 average, 475 homers, and more than 1,900 RBI, plus 7 batting titles and 3 World Series rings. Only Pete Rose had more hits in the National League. Musial also led the majors in humility.
You've got a bushel of Major League records behind you, Stan. How do you feel about this season as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think I'm right in my prime right now, and I'm looking forward to a fine year.
He is great for this category because he's way underrated. You take power, average, lack of strikeouts. You know, you can make a case and put him easily in the top 10 hitters of all time. The numbers are overwhelming.
Stan Musial is ridiculously underrated, and I have absolutely no idea why. For some reason, when people talk about the greatest players in baseball history, his name does not come up. And that's an outrage because it certainly deserves to be in the discussion.
Line drive, there it is! Into left field! Hit number 3,000! A run is scored! Musial around first! On his way to second with a double! Holy cow, he came through!
St. Louis was at the time the West Coast. I mean, it was a coast, it was on a river, rivers have coasts, but it was as far west as you could get.
Stan Musial was geographically challenged. Had he played his career in New York, we would have called him Lou Gehrig.
He wasn't a great copy, didn't have enemies, didn't have tantrums.
Consequently, the press ignored him more than they did the other superstars of that era.
There she goes again! It might be out of here! It is! Another home run!
He's got a world-famous nickname, Stan the Man Musial, which was given to him by opposing fans. He was given to him by the fans in Brooklyn.
Here's a man with an unorthodox batting stance that put up serious numbers year in and year out.
Even with the numbers, he was unique. 3,630 hits.
The thing I enjoyed most was just putting on the uniform, being a big league ball player, and hitting the 300 a lot of years.
He is one of God's chosen people, and his whole life's been that way. The legend's real. It's true. All of it.